You know what that sound is? It's your alarm. It's absolute terror and panic. You fell asleep and you didn't finish your work. Oh, no. Oh, man, what a beautiful, beautiful animation. Well done to the animation school. Absolutely love this feature on a Wednesday morning. And it makes the perfect prelude to our discussion right now. School exams. There is just no running away from them. They are inescapable, and they are, in fact, so important. They're a milestone, a marker that you get to put down to show how far you've come. And this morning, educational psychologist Dr. Sharon Aitken joins us to talk more about the importance of, yes, you guessed it, a good night's rest while studying for exams, as well as maybe some great tips for preparation for our exams. So we're speaking to the parents and we're speaking to the kids as well. Sharon, great to have you here in person.
It's lovely to be back.
How tired do you feel right now after watching that animation?
I'm very tired after watching that, I must say.
Oh, we had Majosi doing a sound check in the background, and I'm just sitting here like, oh, my word. Absolutely beautiful stuff. But it really does kind of hit to the heart of the matter. It can be stressful entering into that exam period, especially if we feel unprepared, and you've got to kind of manage it on two fronts. Yes, you want to have done the body of work so that you are comfortable going into it, but in the moment, going into that kind of phase, you need to be rested, you need to be kind of looking after yourself. But let's start with the studying element of it. We know that it's not a one-size-fits-all. We all respond differently. I remember I responded visually, so I would draw like mind maps and kind of, but some kids can read it and take it in, some need to hear it. Why is it important to find your study style?
Well, as soon as you find your own study technique or what actually works for you, then the information, you're able to process it a lot more efficiently. And I think one of the areas that people often neglect to explore is actually movement while working. So particularly people who have difficulty concentrating when they sit still, you can get things like Pilates balls, wobble boards, standing desks, and then you can actually move around quite a bit when you're working. And I think that's an area to explore, because we tend to sit down a lot too much at the moment, you know, and then you do get sleepy and drowsy. So if they could explore that, there might be something worthwhile.
We've been directed as adults to explore that, just from getting away from the sedentary lifestyle.
Exactly,
you know? It's just healthier to do that. What is the optimal study time frame? How should we kind of work out our flow? Or is, again, that very different for every person?
It's different for every person and every subject. So if you find a subject difficult, then you can't concentrate for as long. But generally, I would say at high school, you should be able to concentrate for approximately 20 to 45 minutes comfortably. And then you need to take about a 5 to 10 minute break where you should be active. You should be getting up and moving around. But yeah, exactly. But most people can concentrate for 20 to 45 minutes. If it's a subject you enjoy, you might even be able to push it for an hour. But I really wouldn't want them to go further than that, because then the concentration plummets, and then you're struggling down here at the bottom where you've got no concentration.
One word retention per hour.
Exactly, and then they sit on their books and they try and force that information in, and it's just not going to work. So they're better off to take structured breaks.
I laugh rightfully because I'm going to play devil's advocate here, because I've kind of found the one job where it is all about cramming. And you have, you know, the adrenaline and the anxiety pushing you forward. I could only cram as you know, and maybe not by choice, but by as a result of my circumstance. How do you feel about pulling an all-nighter, cramming? Because sometimes as an adult in life, you've got to do it. You've got to just pull a rabbit out of the hat. How do you feel about that as a
Look, we've all done it.
Yeah.
We've all done it. It is something that inevitably is going to happen. You're going to get caught short-footed or something. It's not ideal. I mean, I'm going to use this moment now to punt what I really want to say about studying, and that is it actually starts on the first day back at school, preparation for exams. If you do a little bit every day, just a little bit, whatever little cupcake size of information you were fed that day in school, and you come home and you learn it off by heart, by the time you get to the exams, the majority of the work is done. Now, that would be the ideal. But, yeah, we do inevitably pull all-nighters, and you usually absolutely exhausted the next day. So for those people who live on adrenaline and function well on adrenaline, they actually can perform quite nicely. But other kids or other people who suffer from anxiety, for them it's not great.
Look, the flip side of that coin is by 11 o'clock in the morning, I am exhausted. So it's a balancing act, but I think this is great advice for parents and for learners as well. I love that. A cupcake size a day, just to manage that workflow, and it starts with your first day back. But we're going to give you some tips if it's not your first day back and you've got to kind of get through the hard yards right now and are preparing for an exam, what you can do as a parent, and ultimately how important it is to get the right amount of sleep.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. Thanks so much for locking back in. Earlier in the show, we spoke to educational psychologist and good friend on the show, Dr. Sharon Aitken, about overcoming procrastination and figuring out our own study style. And we're continuing that conversation with her right now. And I can't help but laugh at myself because I was probably the worst studier. But I knew this because my sister was probably the best.
Oh.
She was just immaculate, and she would smash it, but she would sit terribly on her bed. But she could go for like 9 hours, and I think she got like 6 distinctions. She was just... And then there was me, and my poor mother had to deal with the two of us on either end of the spectrum. But I think where my mum got creative with me, and this is maybe where we can really help parents, was looking at all of those factors. So study environment, making sure that I was in the right kind of space. How do we go about setting... You mentioned just sitting and what we do with our hands, or maybe standing. These are elements. How important is it to have the right environment to study in?
Look, that is pretty essential. But interestingly, it varies from person to person. So I've worked with kids where going to sit in a restaurant or a cafe actually works, students. Other ones prefer sitting in the library, and others need the quiet of a bedroom. Some like to play music because it creates a white noise, and then it cuts out the dogs barking and any other distractions around them. Hardy does. And I think light is an important factor, because if it's too bright, it creates like visual fatigue with the light reflecting off the paper. If it's too dark, then also you're getting visual fatigue. Yeah. And then it makes you think you've lost your concentration when actually it's just the lighting. Temperature is another big thing, particularly in winter. There's a tendency to close all the windows and make everything very warm, and that's going to make you quite drowsy. So there's actually quite a lot that you need to take into consideration.
You want to keep it fresh.
Yeah.
Studying in or out of bed. I can't think of anything more dangerous for me. I would have fallen asleep.
You know what? I went through my early uni years, varsity years, studying in bed. I was a bed studier, but I can tell you it's really not the best thing to do, because it does make you feel sleepy, tired. You want to rest.
Think about your back, man. Yeah.
And you're in a bad physical position. Yeah, you're gonna tire.
How do we move away from cell phones? Now more than ever we are connected, especially after the pandemic. It's how we've stayed connected, it's how we've studied, it's how we engage with the world. How do we as a parent justify and limit the amount of time that our kids are spending connected to their devices?
You don't justify it. You just say you have a limited amount of time. When you're doing your homework and you're studying, your phone is not to be in your bedroom. Then the kids will tell you, but I need my phone to study. Then you have to say to them, okay, you have a limited amount of time to access the information that you need on your phone, and then it goes off in the kitchen or somewhere charging, and it's not in the room with you. Because in my 50s, I cannot not look at my phone if it's next to me while I'm writing reports. So I don't see how...
It's a compulsion,
Yeah, and the kids are not developmentally ready to sort of manage themselves, so you have to be firm.
And with yourself as well, maybe. Just be firm. You've got to unplug, disconnect. How important are practice tests?
Very.
Why?
Very important. Because one of the things kids do is they work very hard to get the information into their head. But what they're actually going to be tested on is getting the information out.
Okay.
If you don't practice retrieving that information, you're going to sit in the exam and you're going to go, oops, I can't find the information in my head. Plus, there's going to be a specific style in which you need to answer depending on the subject. So you actually need to be going through those past papers. Unfortunately, a lot of schools no longer allow or give past papers to pupils. So obviously in matric, they're accessible on the internet. But in the lower grades, it's often not possible. But there are really good study guides that have mock questions that you can go through.
There are a lot of great platforms out there. You do, and many that are being offered now zero data.
Exactly.
Charge, so.
There's some wonderful, as you said, platforms.
Do a bit of investigating there. Sleep. It seems like a no-brainer, but it's often the first thing we sacrifice. And we've spoken about those kind of all-nighters, looking at that amazing cartoon. How important on a physical level and an emotional level going into that day of the big test is sleep.
It's crucial. I was trying to think of a good metaphor on the way here today to explain it. But if you cram learning, you've basically run an ultra marathon. And if you don't get sleep, you go from an ultra marathon into a marathon. I mean, you are exhausted. You're not going to perform your best. So you need, ideally, before an exam, 8 to 10 hours of sleep.
Okay.
That would be ideal. I certainly wouldn't want to push it less than that. But I mean, if you've pulled an all-nighter, you've pulled an all-nighter. You must know you're going to go into the exam exhausted.
Yeah, and often there's another exam coming up in a few days after the fact, so you need to get back into that cycle.
And that's why you start from the beginning of the year.
You got it, with those cupcake size. I love that. Even a popcorn kernel size.
Anything.
Anything. Get it
do
in there.
something.
Oh, Sharon, thank you so much. I love the fact that there are ways that we can approach this. Yes, we have spoken about being prepared as early as possible. But the main thing is, if you are having to go into those stressful periods, just make sure you start with getting a good night's rest, and the rest will probably fall into place.